Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to chapter 42 of The Claverings by Anthony Trollope. This chapter is called Restitution, in which young Harry Clavering, having made his peace with the women of the Burton family, now has one more task in front of him, which is to broach the subject with the reason why that peace was disturbed with Lady Ongar. So we are still in Onslow Crescent here. He has gone there expecting that he would have a hard time of it, but instead the women have welcomed him with open arms. And the person who's been missing has been the man of the house, Theodore Burton, who does not like Harry Clavering's behavior and was pretty happy that behavior was going to cost him Florence Burton. So this is Restitution. Harry stayed a little too long with his love, a little longer at least than had been computed, and in consequence met Theodore Burton in the Crescent as he was leaving it. This meeting could hardly be made without something of pain, and perhaps it was as well for Harry that he should have such an opportunity as this for getting it over quickly. But when he saw Mr. Burton under the bright gas lamp, he would very willingly have avoided him had it been possible. "Well, Harry," said Burton, giving his hand to the repentant sheep. "How are you, Burton?" said Harry, trying to speak with an unconcerned voice. Then, in answer to an inquiry about his health, he told of his own illness, speaking of that confounded fever having made him very low. He intended no deceit, but he made more of the fever than was necessary. "When will you come back to the shop?" Burton asked. It must be remembered that though the brother could not refuse to welcome back to his home his sister's lover, still he thought that the engagement was a misfortune. He did not believe in Harry as a man of business, and had almost rejoiced when Florence had been so nearly quit of him. And now there was a taint of sarcasm in his voice as he asked as to Harry's return to the chambers at the Adelphi, because Harry is hardly ever there, and isn't very cut out for business when he is there. "I can hardly say quite yet," said Harry, still pleading his illness. They were very much against my coming up to London so soon. Indeed, I should not have done it had I not felt so very, very anxious to see Florence. I don't know, Burton, whether I ought to say anything to you about that." "I suppose you have said what you had to say to the women?" "Oh, yes. I think they understood me quite perfectly. I hope that I understood them." "In that case, I don't know that you need say anything to me. Come to the Adelphi as soon as you can, that's all. I never think myself that a man becomes a bit stronger after an illness by remaining idle." Then Harry passed on, and felt that he had escaped easily in that interview. In this, as in so many things, Theodore Burton is willing to be guided by the women in his life. But as he walked home, he was compelled to think of the step which he must next take. This is Harry we're talking about. When he had last seen Lady Ongar, he had left her with the promise that Florence would be deserted for her sake. As yet that promise would by her be supposed to be binding. Indeed, he had thought it to be binding on himself, till he had found himself under his mother's influence at the parsonage. During his last few weeks in London, he had endured an agony of doubt, but in his vacillations the pendulum had always veered more strongly towards Bolton Street than Onslow Crescent, in other words, more strongly towards Julia Ongar and her money. Now the swinging of the pendulum had ceased altogether. From henceforth Bolton Street must be forbidden ground to him, and the sheepfold in Onslow Crescent must be his home till he should have established a small, peculiar fold for himself. But as yet he had still before him the task of communicating his final decision to the lady in Bolton Street. As he walked home, he determined that he had better do so in the first place by letter, and so eager was he as to the propriety of doing this at once that on his return to his lodgings he sat down and wrote the letter before he went to his bed. It was not very easily written. Here, at any rate, he had to make those confessions of which I have before spoken, confessions which it may be less difficult to make with pen and ink than in spoken words, but which, when so made, are more degrading. The word that is written is a thing capable of permanent life, and lives frequently to the confusion of its parent. A man should make his confessions always by word of mouth, if it be possible. Here echoing the well-known dictum of organized crime, never write when you can speak, and never speak when you can nod. Whether such a course would have been possible to Harry Clavering may be doubtful. It might have been that in a personal meeting the necessary confession would not have got itself adequately spoken. Our narrator here is being diplomatic, in implying that had Harry gone in person, he might have ended up right back where he started, and none of this would be true anymore. Thinking perhaps of this, he wrote his letter as follows that night. dated Bloomsbury Square, July 1860, whatever. The date was easily written. But how was he to go on after that? In what form of affection or indifference was he to address her to whom he had at last meeting called his own, his dearest Julia? He got out of this difficulty in the way common to ladies and gentlemen under such stress, and did not address her by any name or any epithet. The date he allowed to remain, and then he went on at once to the matter of his subject, and this is the first part of the letter. I feel that I owe it to you at once to tell you what has been my history during the last few weeks. I came up from Clavering today, and have since been with Mrs. and Miss Burton. Immediately on my return from them, I sit down to write to you. Now, as the narrator is going to point out here, that is all that Julia Ongar needs to hear, really. If Harry Clavering, coming up from Clavering Rectory, had decided to throw in his lot with Julia, he would have gone to her. He wouldn't have needed to write her a letter. He would have gone to her. Telling her that he has spent the day with the Burtons tells her everything that he needs to do, but he has to go on. The narrator tells us, after having said so much, Harry probably felt that the rest of his letter would be surplusage. Those few words would tell her all that it was required that she should know. But courtesy demanded that he should say more, and he went on with his confession. And this is the next part of the letter. You know that I became engaged to Miss Burton soon after your own marriage. I feel now that I should have told you that when we first met. And yet, had I done so, it would have seemed as though I had told it with a special object. I don't know whether I make myself understood in this. I can only hope that I do so. And here the narrator interjects, understood? Of course she understood it all. She required no blundering explanation from him to assist her intelligence. But then Trollope restrains himself and just gives us the rest of the letter without interruption. I wish now that I had mentioned it. It would have been better for both of us. It would have spared me much pain, and you perhaps some uneasiness. I was called down to Clavering a few weeks ago about some business in the family, and then became ill, so that I was confined to my bed instead of returning to town. Had it not been for this, I should not have left you so long in suspense. That is, if it has been suspenseful. For myself, I have to own that I have been very weak. Worse than weak, I fear you will think. I do not know whether your old regard for me will prompt you to make any excuses for me, but I am well sure that I can make none for myself, which will not have suggested itself to you without my urging it. If you choose to think that I have been heartless, or rather, if you are able to so think of me, no words of mine, written or spoken now, will remove that impression from your mind. I believe that I need write nothing further. You will understand from what I have said all that I should have to say were I to refer at length to that which has passed between us. All that is over now, and it only remains for us to express a hope, that you may be happy. Whether we shall ever see each other again, who shall say? But if we do, I trust we may not meet as enemies. May God bless you here and hereafter, Harry Clavering. So that's his letter. When the letter was finished, Harry sat for a while by his open window, looking at the moon over the chimney pots of his square, and thinking of his career in life as it had hitherto been fulfilled. The great promise of his earlier days had not been kept. His plight in the world was now poor enough, though his hopes had been so high. He was engaged to be married, but had no income on which to marry. He had narrowly escaped great wealth. It was hard for him to think on that without regret, but he did strive to think of it so. Though he had told himself that it would have been an evil for him to have depended on the money which had been procured by the very act which had been to him an injury, to have dressed himself in the feathers which had been plucked from Lord Ongar's wings, it was hard for him to think of all that he had missed, and rejoice thoroughly that he had missed it. But he told himself that he had so rejoiced, and endeavored to be glad that he had not soiled his hands with riches which never would have belonged to the woman who he had loved had she not earned them by being false to him. Early on the following morning he sent off his letter, and then, putting himself into a cab, bowled down to Onslow Crescent. The sheepfold now was very pleasant to him when the head shepherd was away, meaning Mr. Burton, and so much gratification it was natural he should allow himself. That evening, when he came from his club, he found a note from Lady Ongar. It was very short, and the blood rushed to his face as he felt ashamed at seeing how much apparent ease she had answered him. He had written with difficulty, and had written awkwardly, but there was nothing awkward in her words. I might point out here before we get to her letter that he's too sick to go to the Adelphi and work at his desk, but he's not too sick to go to Onslow Crescent for the day, nor to his club. But this is her letter to him, her note. Dear Harry, we are quits now. I do not know why we should ever meet as enemies. I shall never feel myself to be an enemy of yours. I think it would be well that we should see each other, and if you have no objection to seeing me, I will be at home any evening that you may call. Indeed, I am at home always in the evening. Surely, Harry, there can be no reason why we should not meet. You need not fear that there will be any danger in it. Will you give my compliments to Miss Florence Burton, with my best wishes for her happiness? Your Mrs. Burton I have seen, as you may have heard, and congratulate you on your friend. Yours always, J.O. The writing of this letter seemed to have been easy enough, and certainly there was nothing in it that was awkward, but I think that the writer had suffered more in the writing than Harry had done in producing his longer epistle. But she had known how to hide her suffering, and had used a tone which told no tale of her wounds. We are quits now, she had said, and she had repeated the word over and over again to herself as she walked up and down her room. Yes, they were quits now, if the reflection of that fact could do any good. She had ill-treated him in her early days, and as she had told herself so often, she had served him rather than injured him by that ill-treatment. She had been false to him, but her falsehood had preserved him from a lot which could not have been fortunate. With such a clog as she would have been round his neck, with such a wife, without a shilling of fortune, how could he have risen in the world? No, though she had deceived him, she had served him. Then, after that, had come the tragedy of her life, and the terrible days of thinking of which she still shuddered, the days of her husband and Sophie Gordeloup, that terrible deathbed, whose attacks upon her honor, misery upon misery, as to which she would never now speak a word to anyone, and as to which she was resolved that she would never speak again. And we haven't heard the specific details of that deathbed. Death by, essentially, cirrhosis of the liver, essentially alcoholism. But with opportunistic infections and raving delirium, it's a horrible death. It's really ugly, and who knows what it was like in those last days. She had sold herself for money and had got the price. But the punishment of her offense had been very heavy, and now, in these latter days, she had thought to compensate the man she had loved for the treachery which she had used to him. That treachery had been serviceable to him, and not the less so would the compensation be very rich. And she loved him, too. Ah, yes, she had always loved him. He should have it all now, everything, if only he would consent to forget that terrible episode in her life, as she would strive to forget it. All that should remain to remind them of Lord Ongar would be the wealth that should henceforth belong to Harry Clavering. Such had been her dream, and Harry had come to her with words of love which made it seem to be a reality. He had spoken to her words of love which he now forced to withdraw, and the dream had dissipated. It was not to be allowed to her to escape her penalty so easily as that. As for him, they were now quits. That being the case, there could be no reason why they should quarrel. But what now would she do with her wealth, and especially how would she act in respect to that place down in the country, meaning Ongar Park? Though she had learned to hate Ongar Park during her solitary visit there, she still looked forward to the pleasure of the property might give her when she should be able to bestow it upon Harry Clavering. But that had been part of her dream, and the dream was over now. Through it all, she had been conscious that she had might hardly dare to hope that the end of her punishment should come so soon, and now she knew that it was not to come. Not ever, really. And as far as she could see, there was no end to her punishment in prospect for her. From her first meeting with Harry Clavering on the platform of the railway station, his presence, or her thoughts of him, had sufficed to give some brightness to her life, had enabled her to support the friendship of Sophie Gordeloup, and also to support her solitude when poor Sophie had been banished. But now she was left without any resource. As she sat alone, meditating on all this, she endeavored to console herself with the reflection that, after all, she was the one whom Harry loved, whom Harry would have chosen had he been free to choose. But the comfort to be derived from that was very poor. Yes, he had loved her once, nay, perhaps he still loved her. But when that love was her own, she had rejected it. She had rejected it, simply declaring to him, to her friends, to the world at large, that she had preferred to be rich. She had had her reward, and bowing her head upon her hands, she acknowledged that the punishment was deserved. Well, okay, Trollope's laying on the schmaltz here. He's trying to make us feel sorry for her, but let's remember, she did this to herself, with her eyes wide open. Her first step after writing her note to Harry was to send for Mr. Turnbull, her lawyer. She had expected to see Harry on the evening of the day on which she had written, but instead of that she had received a note from him in which he had said that he would come to her before long, so not immediately. Mr. Turnbull was more instant in his obeying her commands, and was with her on the morning after he received her injunction. He was almost a perfect stranger to her, having seen her only once, and that for a few moments after her return to England. Her marriage settlements had been prepared for her by Sir Hugh's attorney, But during her sojourn in Florence, it had become necessary that she should have someone in London to look after her own affairs, and Mr. Turnbull had been recommended to her by lawyers employed by her husband. He was a prudent, sensible man who recognized it to be his imperative interest to look after his client's interests. And he had done his duty by Lady Ongar in that trying time immediately after her return. Remember, as soon as she got back, the Courton people, Lord Ongar's family, wanted to contest the settlement. All of it, the terms of the settlement. Now, they have changed their mind. That has all happened off stage. Some angel in the Courton family decided to convince everyone else, let's stop hounding this woman. We'll make her an offer for Ongar Park, but let's stop trying to contest her legally. The settlement is entirely legal. We might not like it. But someone had a change of heart in the Courton family. I'd love to get that story. We never will. An offer had been made by the Courton family to give Julia her income without opposition if she would surrender Ongar Park. To this she had made objections with indignation, and Mr. Turnbull, though he had at first thought that she would be wise to comply with the terms proposed, had done her work for her with satisfactory expedition. Since those days she had not seen him, but now she'd summoned him, and he was with her in Bolton Street. I want to speak to you, Mr. Turnbull, she said, about that place down in Surrey. I don't like it. Not like Ongar Park, said he. I have always heard it was so charming. It is not charming to me. It is a sort of property I don't want, and I mean to give it up. Lord Ongar's uncles would buy your interest in it, I have no doubt. Exactly. They have sent to me, offering to do so. My brother-in-law, Sir Hugh Clavering, called on me with a message from them saying so. I thought that he was very foolish to come, and so I told him. Such things should be done by one's lawyers. Don't you think so, Mr. Turnbull? Mr. Turnbull smiled as he declared that, of course, he, being a lawyer, was of that opinion. I am afraid they will have thought me to be uncivil, continued Julia, as I spoke rather brusquely to Sir Hugh Clavering. I am not inclined to take any steps through Sir Hugh Clavering, but I do not know that I have any reason to be angry with the little lord's family. So she refers to her dead husband, tiny little Lord Ongar. Really, Lady Ongar, I think not. When your ladyship returned, there was some opposition, thought of for a while, but I really do not think it was their fault. No, it was not their fault. That was my feeling at the time. It was indeed. It was the fault of Lord Ongar, my husband. As regards all the Courtons, I have no word of complaint to make. It is not to be expected, it is not desirable that they and I should be friends. It is impossible, after what has passed, that there should be such a friendship. But they have never injured me, and I wish to oblige them. Had Ongar Park suited me, I should doubtless have kept it, but it does not suit me, and they are welcome to have it back again. Has a price been named, Lady Ongar? No price need be named. There need be no question of a price. Lord Ongar's mother is welcome to the place, or rather to such interest as I have in it. And to pay a rent? Suggested Mr. Turnbull. To pay no rent. Nothing would induce me to let the place or to sell my right in it. I will have no bargain about it. But as nothing will also induce me to live there, I am not such a dog in the manger as to wish to keep it. If you will have the kindness to see Mr. Courton's lawyer, and to make arrangements about it. And here, the dog in the manger, it's going to come up again in this chapter. It's a reference to a fable of Aesop about a dog who stands in a manger, and he won't let anybody use it. He's not going to use it himself, since he's a dog. He's not going to lay down in a manger. But he barks at anyone else who comes close. It's supposed to be the picture of someone who denies themselves a pleasure while denying others that same pleasure. But Lady Ongar, what you call your right in the estate is worth over £20,000. It is indeed. You could borrow £20,000 on the security of it tomorrow. But I don't want to borrow £20,000. Well, no, exactly. Of course you don't. But I point that out, in fact, to show the value. You would make a present of that sum of money to people who do not want it, who have no claim upon you. I really don't see how they could take it. Mrs. Courton wishes to have the place very much. But, my lady, she has never thought of getting it without paying for it. Lady Ongar, I really cannot advise you to take any such step as that. Indeed, I cannot. I should be wrong as your lawyer if I did not point out to you that such a proceeding would be quite romantic. Quite so. What the world would call quixotic. People don't expect such things as that. They don't, indeed. Well, people don't often have the reasons that I have, said Lady Ongar. Mr. Turnbull sat quiet for a while, looking as though he were unhappy. The proposition made to him was one which, as a lawyer, he felt to be very distasteful. He knew that his client had no male friends in whom she confided, and he felt that the world would blame him if he allowed this lady to part with her property in the way that she had suggested. So once again, as in our last Trollope read aloud, we have a willful main character threatening to make a public disgrace out of their lawyer. And you will find that I am in earnest, she continued, smiling, and you may as well give way to my vagaries with good grace. They would not take it, Lady Ongar. At any rate, we can try them. If you will make them understand that I do not want at all want the place, that it will go to rack and ruin because there's no one to live there, I'm sure they will take it. Ongar Park is not going to rack and ruin. It has a full staff who are as happy as clams, living in the lap of luxury without anyone to tell them what to do. Then Mr. Turnbull again sat silent and unhappy, thinking with what words he might best bring forward his last and strongest argument against this rash proceeding. Lady Ongar, he said, in your peculiar position, there are double reasons why you should not act in this way. What do you mean, Mr. Turnbull? What is my peculiar position? The world will say that you have restored Ongar Park because you were afraid to keep it. Indeed, Lady Ongar, you had better let it remain as it is. I care nothing for what the world says, she exclaimed, rising quickly from her chair. Nothing, nothing. You should really hold by your rights. You should, indeed. Who can possibly say what other interests may be concerned? You may marry and live for the next 50 years and have a family. It is my duty, Lady Ongar, to point these things out to you. I am sure you are quite right, Mr. Turnbull, she said, struggling to maintain a quiet demeanor. You, of course, are only doing your duty. But whether I marry or whether I remain as I am, I shall give up this place. And as for the world, as you call it, may say, I will not deny that I cared much for that on my immediate return. What people said then made me very unhappy, but I care nothing for it now. I have established my rights, and that has been sufficient. To me, it seems the world, as you call it, has been civil enough in its usage of me lately. It is only those who should have been my friends that I have a right to complain. If you will please do this thing for me, I will be obliged to you. If you are quite determined about it, I am quite determined. What is the use of the place to me? I never shall go there. What is the use even of the money that comes to me? I have no purpose for it. I have nothing to do with it. There was something in her tone as she said this which filled him with pity. You should remember, he said, how short a time it is since you became a widow. Things will be different with you soon. He's not the first person to point this out to her, that things will look different when you re-enter the world. My clothes will be different, if you mean that, she answered, but I do not know that there will be any other changes in me. But I am wrong to trouble you with all this talk. If you will let Mr. Corton's lawyer know, with my compliments to Mrs. Corton, that I have heard that she would like to have the place, and that as I do not want it, I will be obliged to you. Mr. Turnbull, having by this time perceived that she was quite in earnest, took his leave, having promised to do her bidding. In this interview, she had told the lawyer only part of the plan which was now running to her head. As for giving up Ongar Park, she took herself no merit for that. The place had been odious to her ever since she had endeavored to establish herself there and had found that the clergyman's wife would not speak to her, that even her own housekeeper would hardly consent to hold converse with her. There you have the nub of it. It's not Ongar Park. Ongar Park is lovely. It's that her disgrace followed her down there. Who would know her disgrace better than the Corton family, than the Ongar family? Her disgrace followed her down there. She wouldn't be a respectable person. She would never be accepted there. That's why it's odious to her. She felt that she would be a dog in the manger to keep the place in her own possession. But she had thoughts beyond this, resolutions only as yet half formed as to a wider surrender. She had disgraced herself, ruined herself, robbed herself of all happiness by a marriage she had made. Her misery had not been simply the misery of that lord's lifetime. As might have been expected, that was soon over. But an enduring wretchedness had come after that, from which she saw no prospect of escape. What was to be her future life, left as she was and would be in desolation? If she were to give it all up, all the wealth that had been so ill-gotten, might there not be some hope of comfort for her? And here we see that in one level anyway, Julia Brabazon is a perfect match for Harry Clavering because they're both morons. They're both morons. Julia Brabazon has been to 3 places in her life. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That is not the whole world. Keep the property, keep the money, and emigrate to Cincinnati. Boom. All of a sudden, everything's different. Or at least wait until you're not a widow anymore and go out into the world. Endow an orphanage. Pay for a library. She had been willing enough to keep Lord Ongar's money and use it for the purposes of her own comfort, while she still hoped that comfort might come from it. The remembrance of all that she had to give had been very pleasant to her, as long as she had hoped that Harry Clavering would receive it. She had not at once felt that the fruit had turned to ashes. But now that Harry was gone from her, now that she had no friend left with whom she could make happy by her munificence, the very knowledge of her wealth was a burden to her. And as she thought of her riches in these first days of her desertion, as she had indeed been thinking since Cecilia Burton had been with her, she came to understand that she was degraded by their acquisition. She had done that which had been unpardonably bad, and she felt like Judas when he stood with the price of his treachery in his hand. He had given up this money, and would not she do the same? There had been a moment in which she had nearly declared that all her purpose to her lawyer, but she had held back with the feeling that she ought to make her plans certain before she communicated them to him. Plus, it would probably have given him a heart attack. This first bit is bad enough. She must live. She could not go out and hang herself as Judas had done. And then there was her title and rank, of which she did not know whether it was within her power to divest herself. She sorely felt the want of someone from whom in her present need she might ask counsel, of some friend to whom she could trust to tell her in what way she might now best atone for the evil she had done. Plans ran through her head which were thrown aside almost as soon as made, because she saw that they were unpracticable. She even longed in these days for her sister's aid, though of old she had thought little of Hermie as a counselor. That's her sister Hermione, Sir Hugh's wife. She had no friend whom she might ask, unless she might still ask Harry Clavering. If she did not keep it all, she might still keep something, enough for a decent life, and yet comfort herself with the feeling that she had expiated her sin. And what would be said of her when she had made this great surrender? Would not the world laugh at her instead of praising her? That world as to which she had assumed, Mr. Trumbull, that she did not care what its verdicts of her may be? She had many doubts. Why had not Harry Clavering remained true to her? But her punishment had come upon her with all its severity, and she acknowledged to herself now that it was not to be avoided. And that is chapter 42, and that is her final wailing, self-pitying thought. Why wasn't Harry true to her? And by that, she could mean one of two things. She could mean, why wasn't he true to her by not pledging himself to anyone else while she married Lord Ongar? Just stay alone when Lord Ongar could maybe live for 50 years. Or she could be thinking, why wasn't he true to her and not go back to Florence Burton? Either way, lots of self-pity. So we're gonna stop it there and move on to the next chapter next time, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.